Welcome back to the Arkitect Fitness YouTube channel. My name is Tony and I'm with Coach Matt, and this is the first episode of the Coach's Couch, where we're going to sit on a couch and answer your questions about health and fitness and nutrition and life and any other topics that you want us to talk about. We're mostly experts in fitness and nutrition, so anything outside of the scope of those two things
take with a grain of salt for sure.
Yep, it's going to be sketchy. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So these are questions that were submitted to us via Facebook, Instagram, email, personal messages, and carrier pigeon. So let's see what we got.
First question will remain anonymous. And this one is, what's the ideal ratio of weight training to cardio for fat loss?
What are your thoughts on that?
I would probably go with like 80-20. I would definitely say there's more of an emphasis of importance on weight training in fat loss and almost in all other circumstances. A little bit of conditioning is important, but it's really that 80% strength training that you're really going to get your results from.
I think that's a pretty fair breakdown. One of the big things that's kind of underrated with fat loss is maintaining as much muscle as possible. And that's kind of why we say fat loss instead of weight loss, because you can do a lot of things to just purely drop your body weight, but you're probably not going to like the way you look when you get to your goal weight.
Exactly.
I personally prefer purely aerobic exercise when I'm not doing strength training, and that's because conditioning work, like interval training, is still anaerobic. Strength training is anaerobic, so I like something that's purely aerobic, which is usually a little bit more boring.
Right, for sure.
Kind of your typical treadmill or bike work or anything like that. Long, slow, distance type of thing. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a good point, but it gets tricky. Not to like bash on CrossFit, but you get the weird, like you can turn any activity into a certain stimulus, but when you start turning strength training into like a conditioning workout, that's when we have to be really careful. Like the high rep Olympic lifting stuff, it's just kind of silly.
Yeah. I also think it's really important to know exactly what you're trying to accomplish with the workout.
Right.
You could make the case that you're kind of killing two birds with one stone if you're doing the Olympic lifts in high rep format, because you're training them and you're also getting, a high intensity workout, but you're kind of half-assing two things instead of whole-assing one thing.
Ron Swanson.
So that is my opinion on that. What's the next question?
Question number 2. Do you have to compete to call yourself a powerlifter or a weightlifter?
You mind if I take this one first?
No, not at all. I was hoping you would.
100% yes. You 100% have to compete to call yourself a powerlifter, weightlifter, football player, basketball player. My stance on this is you don't gain a whole lot being a powerlifter or weightlifter as far as money, fame.
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. It sucks up a ton of your time, ton of your resources, puts your body through hell. I think it's worth it as far as the personal development you get out of it, but I do think we should reserve that little bit of like prestige. People who compete earn it. I think it's cheap to go into the gym and squat, bench, and deadlift and say, oh yeah, I'm a powerlifter. No, you're not.
Right.
And as silly as it seems, like people go, oh, all you're doing is you're just following 3 commands and competition, but you would be surprised how many people blow it. When those lights are on you, there's nobody else doing anything in that area except watching you.
For sure.
People tend to get nervous and they crumble a little bit, and you get, I think, better as an athlete and lifter by competing. So I think, yeah, you got to reserve that for the people that have actually paid their dues, for lack of a better term.
Right. I strongly agree with that. I think obviously you can train like a weightlifter, a powerlifter, or a bodybuilder and not consider yourself one of those things.
Yeah.
But to give yourself like that label, you got to do the uncomfortable part, and that's like stepping on a platform and putting yourself out there.
Possibly bodybuilding more than the other two even, because that's probably with weightlifting, the competition prep is a thing, but it's still a lot like normal training, where the competition prep for bodybuilding is like hell from what I understand.
Exactly. It's miserable.
So I think maybe more than anything else, and that especially, you're going up on stage to have people judge you.
For sure.
That's it.
Which like mentally, there's a huge difference there.
Right. So I think you definitely have to compete to use that title. Anyone else is just like a pretender, you know what I mean? And a lot of people that don't compete and call themselves powerlifters or weightlifters or bodybuilders might actually do really well.
Right. Right.
But you don't know, so I don't think you should be able to say that. And this is actually funny because there was a big thing with C.T. Fletcher. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No, actually I didn't.
So he did a video where he was like, I'm a weightlifter, motherfucker, and same thing. And then someone was like, you're not a weightlifter. You've never competed in the sport of weightlifting. And he's like, I've been lifting weights for 30 years and doing his thing, saying...
Right.
Doing his T.T. Fletcher thing. But it's just like, yeah, man, like you competed in powerlifting, you're a powerlifter.
For sure.
Which is why I always tend to say like weight training or strength training to kind of differentiate from weightlifting the sport.
There's a huge difference between the one word weightlifting and the two words weightlifting.
Yeah.
For sure. And like you said, you have to be able to distinguish between those two.
And I think people who've never competed don't understand that.
No, not at all. Like, if you've competed and then decide not to compete anymore, I think it'd be a little bit less of a stretch to call yourself, like, a powerlifter or weightlifter.
Right.
But if you've never competed at all and have no intentions of doing so, you can train like it, but you're not that.
Well, I've competed in both, and I don't call myself either. I just call myself a coach now.
Right.
Whenever I'm, like, trolling somebody on Facebook, people are always like, oh, do you even f***ing lift? I'm like, nope. No, I do not. I just coach now.
Well, everyone needs that, like, identity to, I don't want to say hide behind, but to identify as, for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a subculture that people are buying into with both powerlifting and weightlifting. Kind of hate the subculture of weightlifting now.
It's gotten nasty.
Powerlifting was really bad. You probably are a little too young to remember this, but in the 90s with geared powerlifting,
right,
it was total just like, do steroids, do whatever you can, put on as much gear as you can to lift as much weight. Who cares about depth? Who cares about, all these standards? And it was just a total meathead show. And now that raw lifting has kind of made a comeback, there's more women coming into the sport.
For sure.
I kind of enjoy the powerlifting community a little bit more now, where with weightlifting there seems to be this thing where weightlifting is definitely more technical than powerlifting. There's no two ways about that. I don't think by admitting that you're taking anything away from powerlifting.
Not at all.
Because sports are not purely judged on their technicality. Like, bowling is really technical. That doesn't mean it's not boring.
Right, exactly.
No offense to any bowlers that might be watching.
Someone's going to get really upset about that.
But I think there's like a group of people who kind of have come into weightlifting and they're like, oh, I do this really technical thing. And it gives them this elitist attitude, which is really unfortunate because it really should just be about like doing better for yourself every time, competing against yourself, being part of a team. But there's a lot of like, and it's funny because it goes hand in hand with Instagram.
Definitely.
Instagram is like perfect for powerlifting and weightlifting because they're both like single rep activities, in their sport sense.
Right. It fits a clip really well, obviously.
Right. Kind of that really fast, quick media. And so now there's like people that act like they're Instagram celebrities because they have like followers on Instagram.
Right. For sure.
So if you enjoyed posting about your training and whatever, but everyone's got a f***ing discount code.
Right.
Everyone's, trying
an ambassador or something.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I don't think people really appreciate how many followers you have to have and how much influence you have to make a tangible amount of money on Instagram.
It's not a couple thousand, I'll tell you that right now.
It's not a couple thousand, and I think you would be much better off just not doing that. So what happens is someone starts to get into weightlifting or powerlifting and they start following athletes that they admire on Instagram, and then they see these athletes posting their daily training and all this stuff, and they go, oh, I should do that. That's what this person's doing. I should do that.
Right.
But that person's a full-time athlete.
Right, that's their job.
That is their
They
job.
do every day. Exactly.
And so I think people would be a lot better off just doing their training, not worrying about filming it and posting about it, and because as you're figuring out, because you're running a professional page for Chasing Strength, it takes time.
So much time.
To film it, to edit it, to put it out there, to try to get it circulated. I've started doing my own training vlog. I'm not some fantastic athlete, but I have like a special circumstance that adds a little bit of uniqueness to my training, and I think that, I can add some value. But a lot of people are just putting content out there without even thinking about, A, is this helping anyone else? And B, is it helping me as a person? Like, no, I think it's making your training worse.
Typically, I would say it makes your training way worse. I have to be careful because, like, if I start recording myself in my lifts, all of a sudden, 90% of my training sessions on my phone.
Right.
So I'm in airplane mode. I'm going to get a remote so I don't even have to walk over to the phone to turn it on and off. And even then I find that there's like a disconnect of like being there, being like present in training.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Too many people on their phones. I think cell phones are totally ruining people's results, and that goes for athletes, but also general fitness people. You know, we coach a lot of parents. We have a lot of people with families. Obviously, that's a normal thing. People will be like, "Oh, I have to, text my kid back. What do you expect me to not text my kid back?" I'm like, "What do you think people did in 1995?"
Right, your kid will be all right.
20 years ago, which wasn't that long ago.
Exactly.
Your kid could wait 40 minutes until you were done training.
Right, and then that also like sets the precedent for like your kids. Everything about your kid being more important than your own personal training. I think that people put it way behind other things. So if you're gonna pick up your phone to see if your kid's doing all right. Is it the worst thing in the world in that moment? No, but you are letting into the attitude that your training comes second to everything else in life.
And I don't know about you, but I cannot pick up my phone and do a single task. Because there's notifications for email, Facebook, voicemails. You get distracted. You go, I'm just going to check what that is. And then you go down the rabbit hole, and next thing you know, you've stood there for 10 minutes in between sets and just...
And you're cold.
You're mentally checked out of it.
You forget what you're doing. Yeah, exactly.
I think airplane mode is huge. So that is the very long-winded answer to, can you call yourself a power lifter if you haven't competed?
How do you think people are judged based on the amount of body fat that they have?
You want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, I'll go first on this one. I think that starts with like how society views people and what we value. And right now, like, we value low body fat. I think it's starting to slowly make a little bit of a change with CrossFit and more like strength athletes becoming cooler, I guess. But for sure, we still value low body fat. And I think that obviously trickles down into training and anywhere you go to compete.
I would agree with that. I think I would add a lot of people start in the gym because they're lacking self-confidence.
Yeah.
So... You see it with guys that think they're too skinny and want bigger muscles. You see it with women that... So I think a lot of people start in the gym because they're lacking self-confidence. And I think what happens a lot, which is really unfortunate, is you have that guy that puts on, 20 pounds of muscle. He's jacked now. And you get this elitist kind of, mindset. And I think people don't even realize that they're doing it. But then they're like... Oh, I'm so awesome because I'm jacked now. And like everyone else should be like me. And if you're not like me, you're a or you're lazy, when there's so many other contributing factors to somebody's leanness. And I just think that like body fat is it's the first thing you see.
Yeah, from like a superficial standpoint. And especially if you're more of like a superficial person, like not to say like judging each other, but comparing.
Right.
That's obviously the first thing that you'll notice.
So I've written about this quite a bit on our blog. We've had normal weight people come in that have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, but you can't see any of those things without a blood test.
Right.
So what's really interesting to me is if you go on social media, you'll see a lot of people pretending like they care about somebody's health, and that's why they're like shaming them. Well, you're going to die an early death if you don't lose weight. And it's like, you don't really give a You're just you're using that to be
Right, no, they don't care.
So it is unfortunate. It's just one of those things. I think my best advice is don't pay attention, don't care.
Right.
What other people think of you has zero impact on your ability to accomplish your goals.
100%.
So.
100%.
Yeah.
All right, next question. When people ask if you're pregnant and you're not, what do you say? Has anyone ever asked you if you're pregnant?
No one has ever asked me that if I'm pregnant because I have a beard.
Yeah, that'll do it.
But I definitely have looked like I'm pregnant many times throughout my life. I tend to wear all my body fat, mostly on my belly. Yeah, I also get bloated super easily. So I'll wake up in the morning and I'll be like, wow, I'm looking really lean. And I'll literally have, a couple eggs and I'm just like, pfft.
Yep.
So I would say if somebody asks you if you're pregnant and you're not, just tell them straight out that you're not. I think honesty is the best policy.
Yeah, don't lie.
Don't lie.
Don't say you're pregnant.
And two, I get a kick out of making people feel a little uncomfortable. So
for sure, make it awkward. Yeah. Every time.
I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I don't think I really can to speak to that one.
Okay.
Why only one core exercise per workout? And to put it into context, usually at the end of our training sessions for most of our clients at Arkitect, we give them an ab and a Tabata exercises. So that's kind of like where the context is coming from.
When we think of abs, we kind of think of like the front abs, the six-pack, the rectus abdominis for people that like fancy words to be dropped. Your abs are your obliques, so we need to train trunk flexion, anti-trunk flexion, trunk rotation, anti-rotation. It's one of those things where I feel like the abs get a better workout with a little bit higher frequency. So that's why we just program them for every workout. When people are new, I actually do program specific ab exercises just to kind of get the foundation laid. But I think beyond that, just a wide variety and high frequencies of doing it every training session. So with the high frequency, it doesn't really make sense to do 2 or 3 ab exercises because it probably get overtrained.
It's just a lot, exactly.
I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I would just say, like, from a point of diminishing returns, you're probably getting a lot of, like, traditional core work out of the session already. And then, like, that ab work at the end is kind of just finishing it off. But I think you just wouldn't get much more out of adding more, and then that's just more time and energy. That brings up a great point that I didn't really think to mention, is that with the way we program, everything is kind of full body. Obviously, there's clients that doesn't apply to at all, that are on more like old school body part splits. It's very goal dependent. But, we do so much that loads the trunk anyway. Deadlifts, squats, contralateral loaded split squats, single arm rows. Exactly.
Without any support. So a lot of stuff's really recruiting the trunk anyway. This is a funny story. I'm not going to mention who this is about, but the person's probably going to watch this, so they're going to get mad at me. But
good.
Years ago, a friend was applying for a job that had a physical assessment, and they failed the sit-ups, and I was kind of giving them about it.
Nice.
And I was saying that I never did sit-ups. And so we just gone out to eat with a bunch of people. I think we went to Ruby Tuesday, and I had like a big greasy cheeseburger and fries. And so I'm just ribbing this person really hard that they're having a hard time with the sit-ups. And so they said, you, I want to see you do it. And so I was like, all right, pull over the car right now.
Oh, nice, on the side of the road.
And we got out on Storrs Street in Concord, which is a little sketchy.
Yeah, not where I do sit-ups. No.
And right on the sidewalk, they held my feet, and I did the sit-ups.
Did you pass?
Oh, yeah, I smoked it. But, the thing is like, I think, one, I'm just kind of naturally, like, good at sit-ups. Like, I would have failed the run miserably.
Right.
But if you train the right way and do a lot of compound movements, I just don't think the ab training is really super crucial.
Agreed.
With the exception of, I think when people are lean and want more like popping abs, I think you do need to go heavier. Like loading ab exercises, like with a lot of load, is something that a lot of people don't think to do.
Right.
Like they'll do a minute of flutter kicks, or like all these high rep things that burn, but like no
one does like the 8 to 12 exactly.
Right. And you think about it, right? Like if you want bigger biceps, you don't grab like a 5-pounder and do 100 reps. You try to like do like heavy rows, heavy pull-ups, and like really strict form, curls with a slow tempo to like keep a more load on the muscle. So.
Right, and the same thing, your abs are muscles, so same concepts apply.
Abs are muscles. Write that down.
Yes. All right. Our next question comes from Brian Nee. His Instagram handle is rhino.bry. And his first question is, how do you plan your warm-up attempts? Which I'm definitely going to let Tony take first. Trust me on this one.
So, great question. Not the easiest thing to answer in a short time span, but have an idea of what you're working up to. So if you're doing a prescribed percentage of your max, obviously that's very easy.
Right.
If you're doing a max out session, definitely have some kind of goal in mind or target in mind. And the way I usually do it for clients is a little bit different than the way I do it for myself, because I've been doing it for so long, it's just very intuitive to me.
Right. And as you get to know your clients better too, you can tweak that as well.
Yeah. But basically, whatever my working weight is or my target weight, my first warm-up set after the bar will always be about 50% of my target.
Gotcha.
And then I'll just make 10% jumps up until about 85 or 90%. And then I'll kind of do it more by what makes logical sense.
Right.
I do want to mention that starting with the bar is super important. I call those free reps. So you'll see a lot of times guys that are really strong, bench a lot or squat a lot, they'll do a loaded set first, And they're like, oh, the bar is so easy for me, it's a waste of time.
Right.
But it's not a waste of time because you're practicing the movement pattern. You're still, even if you're not stimulating the muscles, you're still warming up the joint. And it's not costing you anything as far as adding fatigue.
Right, there's literally no adverse effects to that.
Right.
It's not extra stress that you have to recover from or anything.
Right. So make 5 to 10% jumps, starting with 50%, and then once you get up to 85, 90%, kind of eyeball it a little bit more.
Right.
But I always start with more reps and decrease the reps as I increase in load. So I might do like 50% for 10, 60% for 8, 70% for 5, 80% for 3, and then maybe like 88% for 2, 93% for 1, and then go to my working weight or my max attempt.
Right.
The other thing you can do is if you're trying to build a little bit of work capacity into your training is if you're doing sets of 10 as your working sets, do sets of 10 all the way up. I don't like that if you're trying to primarily build strength or set a new best for a set of 10 because you're just going to needlessly fatigue yourself.
Right, it's a lot of fatigue.
When it comes to maxing out specifically, always go for a kind of small PR, 1 or 2 kilos on your first PR attempt above your current max. So, hey bud. A lot of times I'll see people that are like, oh, I'm going for a new PR squat and my current max is like 130 and I really want 300 pounds, which is 137. So they'll go from like, 127 right to 137.
Right.
That.
Well, then it's all or nothing.
And then it's all or nothing.
Right.
So if you're shooting for 137, your current max is 130, I would go 131. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, so much of training and like making big lifts is about momentum and confidence.
Right.
And this is the same reason why you pick kind of like a manageable opener at a powerlifting or weightlifting meet. Because if you go out there and you miss your first lift, then you start to get that pressure like,
yeah,
I got to make the next one.
It's not a good feeling.
Because if I don't make the next one, then I have to make the third one, and I don't want to be in that situation. Then you have that pressure, and you go out and you miss the second one. Now you're like freaking out.
Snowballs, yeah.
It snowballs. So I think it's the same way even in the gym. You go make that 1 or 2 kilo PR. You have the confidence of, okay, like no matter what happens from here on out, I know I made an improvement. You have that kind of momentum going forward. You also have a much better idea of, is 137, or is my goal weight kind of realistic, or do I only have a couple more kilos in me? And then like, okay, so let's say you do 131 and you decide, I'm not going to make 137, but I probably will make 135. Well, then you get to walk away with a 5 kilo PR after you do that.
Right, as opposed to the alternative path, if you're just gone 127, 137, if you didn't hit it, you got 127. That's a huge difference between that and 135.
Right. Right. So you didn't. So then that scenario, you didn't PR.
Right.
You feel like because you made zero improvement basically.
Right. And then you're not set up to PR the next time you come in and try it because you're pissed.
Right. The other thing too is a lot of times you'll see people go, well, if I don't make it, then I'll drop down and do something lighter. But you fatigue yourself both physically and mentally so much
tremendously
when you miss a lift, especially because those lifts that are like right on the edge tend to be grinders. They're a 4 or 5 second lift, which is a lot.
Right. No, that's a long time.
So
another question from Brian here. Brian wants to know what our go-to meals are, any meal prep tips we might have, and just anything along that line.
Well, you tend to bring food with you to the gym more than I do, so you probably do more meal prep than I do, so I'll let you tackle this first.
Yeah, I do a lot of meal prep just because I get busy with things and I get caught up, and it sounds really silly, but I won't eat enough. And I'm approaching it more from that standpoint. So I guess my meal prep would be a little bit different than most people. I've got a few like go-tos. One I stole from Anna. We just do like a sweet potato and turkey or ground turkey skillet, which is delicious.
That sounds awesome.
It is like really good. And then 90% of the stuff I make is with ground beef, just purely because I need a lot of fats, I need a lot of protein, and I need a lot of calories right now. So that kind of covers all three. So I'll do like burgers. I hate reheating them, but it's simple, it's easy, stuff like that. I approach it a little bit differently. I try and make as little attachment emotionally to food as possible, so I can just eat with a number in mind and kind of get away with that. So my meal prep is a little weird.
How much do you cook at one time? Do you cook like a whole week's worth? You do a couple days worth?
Typically, I'll do the whole week's worth of lunches, because lunch is the one meal where I'm not going to have time to make. I'm either leaving a shift, coming back to a shift, or I get home and I just want to take a nap in the middle of the day, or I've got stuff going on. So I'll do every lunch for the week. So obviously that's 5 meals. And then I'll do breakfasts, which are just like overnight oats. So simple. And then dinners is what I'll batch. Like, I'll probably cook on Sunday for like through Wednesday. And then Wednesday night, I'll cook once again until like the weekend. Just because a lot of times me and Anna will sit down and try and eat together or something too.
I'm probably the worst person to ask about meal prep, mostly because I just don't do any. My schedule is insane. Owning a business is nuts. Also playing a band that, practices twice a week. Plus I'm, constantly trying to, add to our social media.
Right.
So a lot of stuff going on like that. I have a dog that, we live in an apartment. We can't just let him out in the backyard. So every time we take him out, we got to take him for a walk. There's just a lot of moving parts. Working split shifts, like you do split shifts at the gym too, so you know how that is, fitting in my own training. But with all that said, I live really close to the gym where I work, so I'm able to come home almost every day at lunchtime to make lunch. And I think for most people, lunch really is the only meal you usually will eat. I do make things that are really quick and easy to make.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of it is simple meals. Simple doesn't mean it's going to be gross. You can make a lot of really healthy, simple meals. One thing Katie does that helps big time is she will track her food the day before, at least as much of it as she can.
Good for her.
And honestly, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because most of us eat the same kinds of foods on a daily basis.
Definitely.
I'm not eating 5 different types of breakfast every day. I eat pancakes, you know what I mean? I eat Kodiak pancakes every day.
Right.
So there's really no reason why, I'm sitting there tracking my dinner at night. I can't also put in tomorrow's breakfast and tomorrow's lunch.
It's going to save you so much time, too.
Saves you time, and I think that once it's in there, you tend to stick to it more.
Definitely.
Because you don't want the hassle of deleting it, changing something else. For me, I'm not the best on meal prep tips. I also hate reheated food.
Yeah, actually, I was having a conversation with someone about that the other day. Some people just can't eat reheated food. It grosses them out. And it's not really the reheating for me, but certain things in a plastic container, I don't know. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And that being said, I don't think you have to meal prep. I think it helps. But like for example, Tony, you just have to have a system or a plan to make the most of your time. And that's all that meal prep is doing, is really accomplishing that.
Honestly, once you're more experienced at tracking your food, you kind of start to know exactly what you have to eat to get to your numbers.
Exactly.
That kind of newbie phase, that first month of tracking, is miserable.
It is.
And that's why a lot of people don't make it through it, which is unfortunate, because once you get to the other side, it's literally like brushing your teeth.
It's so much easier, yeah. And you can even not that I recommend it, but you get to a point where you can kind of eyeball food and be like, that's about that.
Yeah.
And then obviously once you enter it, you can play around with it a little more. But at least going out to dinner or something, you can be like, I know what I probably should have or probably shouldn't.
One tip I can give you is do a budget. Look at how much money you've spent on eating out in the last month or 2 months.
Yeah.
And that will be a big motivator to eat more home-cooked meals and prepare more. I know for me,
sure.
Even when I worked a job where I did have to do more meal prep, I would bring it with me, and then people at work would be like, oh, we're going here, and I'd be like, all right, and then I would end up throwing away the food that I prepared.
Then you're paying double.
You're paying double. So I think a lot of times you don't really realize, I would say most people's budgets is a huge chunk is dedicated to restaurants, because it's fun to go places and you go on dates with your significant other or your husband or wife, but it's super expensive.
So expensive. One of the things I used to do with clients in Boston is people would be like, we'd try and break the numbers down. A lot of people wanted to do training and it was just too expensive, and we'd sit down and we kind of make a budget together, and we'd find out that they're already spending that much, if not more, going out to eat and drink during the month. And then that kind of goes hand in hand with their weight loss goals. We're like, hey, let's go out to eat, let's drink a little bit less, and then let's take that same exact money and invest it into yourself.
Yeah.
And that kind of kills two birds with one stone.
Restaurant food is expensive monetarily, and it's super expensive for macros and calories.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Being 258 pounds, I have a lot of macros, even though I'm cutting, and even I have a hard time fitting in some restaurant food, even early in the day when I still have lots of macros left.
For sure.
I think this is part of the reason why women struggle with weight loss so much, is because when you go to a restaurant, they don't have men's and women's portions.
Right.
They just have...
That's a really good point.
They just have the portion. And women's calorie needs are usually lower than men's because they're typically physically smaller people. Less testosterone, less muscle, which are both very, calorie absorbing.
Right.
So...
Well, and then, like you said, the same... Say it's a 1,200 calorie burger, for a guy might not have the same damage on your macros for that day as a smaller woman.
Right.
Like, that will destroy you for the day.
And I found, unfortunately, appetite usually doesn't discriminate based on gender either. So
No.
I know Katie, I definitely have a bigger appetite than her, but not by much. But her calorie needs are, 1,200 a day less than mine.
Exactly, which, like you said, is not reflective of, like, your actual appetite.
Right. You put some chicken fingers in front of her with some barbecue, buffalo sauce and blue cheese, and she'll...
I was going to say, Anna's the same way. She's
house
picky.
the whole thing.
But yeah, if you get something she likes.
All right, so what do we have for another question?
Nice. So the next one is from Mickey, and I think this will be the funnest one to answer today, personally. But what he's asking is, if you're trying to become a better athlete overall, what quality should you prioritize first? And some of the examples that he gave were pure strength, agility, plyometrics, and conditioning, or whether taking like a combination approach is best. I used to be a big time strength guy right from the beginning, very much so, almost die hard that way. And while I think that strength is like the one athletic quality that'll raise every other quality, I think it's important to build like a good base first, just purely from like preventing injuries, but then also just understanding your body and being able to move. If you can't like control your body through space, loading it is not the best idea. I'm not recommending like barefoot body weight training for the rest of your life, but I would say work capacity is the number one thing that we're trying to develop, which is just the amount of work that you can perform and then recover from. Because if you have two athletes and everything else being equal, the one who has more work capacity and can perform more work and recover from it and then do the same thing the next day than the other guy is going to get better so much faster. That's basically what steroids are, is increasing the amount of work you can recover from.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this question and actually take an opportunity to make fun of CrossFit a little bit.
Nice.
I think it's a good question, but it lacks context. This is true with athletics and general fitness. People kind of think of those as global concepts when they're really not. Like, fitness and athleticism are both contextual. And the trap that people fall into is the less healthy and fit and athletic you are, the more progress you can make when you're first starting out.
Right.
So if you're a couch potato and you just don't do anything, and you tested your 1 rep max bench press, and then you started riding a bicycle every day, and you got to the point where you were doing maybe like, let's say 100 miles a week on your bike, and then you retested your max bench, you would, without a doubt, bench press more weight. I'm not saying that bicycling is the secret to a bigger bench. The point of that is when you're sedentary and underdeveloped, literally any stimulus is going to kind of improve almost all physical attributes.
Right.
Beyond that beginner level, you really need to start to specifically train for individual attributes and events. And the trap that people fall into, and this is with athletics and with fat loss, is they go, I did this thing, I made progress, then I plateaued. Now I just need to do even more of that thing. And that is not true. So what people will do is they'll be like, I started going to this boot camp class and I lost 20 pounds and I plateaued, but I was going 3 times a week. Now I'm going to go 5 times a week. That's not necessarily the answer. And I think that CrossFit kind of sells you this concept that athleticism is this global thing and you need to develop every attribute. They do an okay job of it, actually.
They're doing better than I would expect.
Right.
Sure.
They're actually doing a pretty good job with it. But that's why you don't see CrossFitters playing in the NFL or winning Olympic medals in any sport. What's really interesting is there's this video on YouTube. I forget who did it, but they basically put a weightlifter, a powerlifter, a strongman, and a bodybuilder and a CrossFitter in a house for like a week. And each day they did a bunch of different physical tests. And then they scored all of it, and then they announced the winner. And the guy that won was an Olympic weightlifter. And it's not because Olympic weightlifting is the most athletic sport, but he was actually the most accomplished athlete in his respective sport compared to all the other guys.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest difference.
Right.
So, you take anyone that's done anything at an elite level, a very elite level. I mean, this guy was like an Olympic or a world champion or world medalist, at least, in weightlifting.
Who was it?
It was Louis Mosquera from, I think, Colombia.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You cannot get to an elite level in anything without generally being smart, motivated,
right.
Gifted in some way. And I think that's why over this like kind of broad spectrum, he did the best. People always look at like NFL linemen and go, oh, well, that guy couldn't even run a mile. Why are we taking something that this guy doesn't train for and judging his fitness based on that?
Right. And then like you said, flip that on its side and so he's competing to be in the NFL. But that same driven, like hardworking, intelligent individual, if his goal was to run a mile, I can guarantee you that guy could turn things around and run a pretty decent mile.
So with all that, I guess I can now answer the question, Mickey's question, which is what should you develop first? First of all, once you're beyond the beginner level, which Mickey absolutely is, he's in phenomenal shape.
Nice job, Mickey.
You have to identify, the needs of your sport. So your goals, and then your individual weaknesses. I could show you a great program for baseball players or a great program for soccer players, but if the individual doing that program is lacking some other things that aren't directly applicable to their sport, those things need to be addressed first.
Right.
So, I don't care if a lineman can power clean 350 pounds if he can't put his arms over his head because his shoulders are so tight.
Right, exactly.
So the needs of the individual supersede the needs of the sport. I'm going to go back to strength. Maximal strength is the foundation for all human movement. Going back to the internet as an example, there's this other YouTube channel called Strength Wars, and same thing, they kind of pit different athletes against each other.
Right.
And one of the first episodes they did was your weight on the bar, and then as many squats as you could in 5 minutes, I think. And the guy that won had the highest 1 rep max back squat.
Right.
And again, because if I squat 600 pounds and Matt squats 300 pounds, and then we both have to do as many reps as possible with 200 pounds, well, he's working at a much higher percentage of his total capacity than I am.
Right.
So even if he's in better conditioned shape than I am, I'm still working less hard on each rep. Maximal strength is the foundation of everything. What happens is you'll see a lot of coaches training team sport athletes, and they're basically powerlifting coaches just using powerlifting techniques. There comes a point of diminishing returns. So get as strong as possible without having to sacrifice any other attribute.
Right.
I think it's really easy. Basically any mid to upper level powerlifter has now gotten to the point where they're basically sacrificing all the other things they need to a human might need.
Definitely, and that's a conscious decision,
right.
And it's totally fine.
Yes.
Because you're accepting of what the requirements are, and then you're making the sacrifices to get there.
Yeah. Next question.
All right, next question comes from Lisa, and she wants to know why it's important to hit specific macro goals, so carbs, protein, fats, when the context being that she knows that your overall calories are the most important thing. I'll let you start with that one because that's way more up your alley.
So when it comes to total weight, so the sum of all of your tissues and everything, calories are the most important thing. Or kind of the only thing, to be honest. So and we kind of talked about this in one of the other questions, you can lose weight by doing a ton of different things. But the question is, are you going to be satisfied with how you look when you get to your goal weight?
Right.
And how you look is not everything, but it is a part of why almost everyone goes on a journey to lose weight. I mean, obviously if you're in danger with your health, that's more important.
Right.
But most people want to look better, they want to feel better. So the ratio of macros matters for that. And Lisa actually did specify in her question, even though we didn't read it, she understands the importance of protein for maintaining muscle, but why do fats and carbs matter? The short answer is they almost don't. There is a little bit of research to support higher carb and a little bit lower fat. And so basically one of the more recent and one of the best studies ever done on fat loss and weight loss is they took two groups of people and they matched for calories, and they put one group on a lower fat, higher carb, and the other on a lower carb, higher fat. And they lost about the same amount of weight. It was there was a difference, but it wasn't statistically significant. But the people that ate a higher carb diet actually lost a little bit more body fat. They kind of theorized, and I would agree with this, is the people that were eating more carbs probably had a little bit more energy. So when they were exercising, they were able to push a little bit harder. Right. And, just if they were doing any type of resistance training, probably just helped to maintain more muscle. So we have a very specific amount of calories and proteins that people should be eating based on their age and their height, their weight, their goal, all that. I think there's a lot more flexibility with carbs and fats than people realize. So if you tend to prefer fattier foods, I would make up the remainder of your calories after protein's accounted for with more fats.
Exactly.
And vice versa for carbs. Low carb and keto is a really big thing right now. Again, we won't get into that, but there's definitely some benefits that have been shown in scientifically, some scientific benefits to keto as far as treating neurological disease, some really promising stuff with just like mood and kind of clarity of mind, but none of that has anything to do with fat loss. So again, just like your exercise, you should know why you're doing the things that you're doing.
Right.
And there's a big difference to your body with being in ketosis and being on a low carb diet. Because if you're eating just low carb, but you're not eating low enough carbs to produce ketones, or if you're eating too much protein, which will also push you out of ketosis, you're eating low carb, but not getting the benefit of ketones. So you're kind of not getting the benefit of either carbs or ketones. It's the worst of both. It's the worst of both. And I don't think a lot of people who think they're doing keto are out there like pissing on keto strips to make sure they're producing ketones.
Exactly.
I prefer higher carbs. For a couple reasons. Carbs are delicious. I definitely have more energy when I eat more carbs. And I just find carbs to be a little bit more abundant in kind of everyday foods.
Definitely.
If you don't eat at restaurants a lot, it's actually pretty easy to avoid fats. And for me, fiber is really important. So it's hard to get adequate fiber if you're on a lower carb diet.
Right.
So I would say, honestly, it's personal preference how you break up the ratio of carbs to fats to make up your remaining calories. But with that said, I would be very careful on skimping on carbs because you could, like I said, worst of both worlds. You're not getting the ketone effect and you're not getting your energy from carbs. So
yeah, I've played around with low carb with my own self, and I just feel terrible.
Yeah,
like energy level, and then also I'd lift absolutely god awful, so that's why I don't do it.
So that actually brings up a good point. How you train should also somewhat determine how you eat. So high power output, heavy intensity, heavy load type training, so like heavy strength training, like 10 reps or less, you're going to burn through a lot of glycogen, which is basically just stored carbs in your muscles and your liver. And so you do need carbs to replenish those.
Definitely.
So if that's how you train, a higher carb diet is going to work better for you. Whereas more aerobic exercise has more fat consumption because you need oxygen to burn fat.
Right.
So if you're an endurance athlete, which kind of is like flips the lid on traditional thought, like a lot of endurance athletes would like carb load the night before a race with big pasta dinners, but actually the science kind of says you might do better with a higher fat diet.
Exactly.
If you're more aerobic, training more aerobically. So yeah, I think it just depends on your personal preference and how you train.
Another kind of nutrition-related question. This is from Heidi, and she wants to know about getting in enough protein when you're not eating meat.
I'll let you take this one first.
First of all, I know there's been a lot of studies and a lot of talk about how meat is cancer-causing and it's so bad for you and all this stuff. First of all, the science doesn't point to that at all, not even a little bit. And second of all, meat's just delicious. And there's a huge difference between plant and animal proteins in the availability for the body. 50 grams of plant protein is not going to go as far as 50 grams of animal protein. And that's a straight fact. So not knowing the exact numbers, you're still going to absorb so much, a higher percentage of that animal protein. And that's going to go towards like building muscle and fueling your body. As opposed to like plant protein, maybe you get 50 grams, but maybe only 20 of that actually goes towards building muscle. And then it also comes from like an amino acid standpoint of you have to get all the essential amino acids. And if you're doing plant protein, yes, you can do that. It makes your life so much more difficult because you have to mix and match. And like I said, at the end of the day, it's just not as bioavailable for your body. So if you're going to do it, there's ways to do it. You just have to be really careful that you're mixing and matching. If you don't have to do it, honestly, don't do it. I see very little benefit.
What are your top picks for non-animal proteins?
Non-animal proteins. Get rid of soy right off the bat. If anything, I'd probably lean you a little bit more towards, if we're talking like protein powders, probably like a hemp-based protein. Soy, no bueno. We've seen a lot of studies that has like an estrogenic effect on people. So for not meat-based protein, I usually steer people more towards like nuts and then combining that with different kinds of like vegetables and fibers.
This is tough. A lot of times people say, why don't you just give me a meal plan? Just tell me what to eat for breakfast, tell me what to eat for lunch and for dinner. And the reason there's a lot of reasons we don't do that. One, you won't learn anything. You won't gain any control over your own life, which is what you need to succeed. You need to take responsibility. You need to take control. But the one of the biggest things is people have such diverse palates, what they prefer to eat, even people that like the same two types of food like them prepared differently and seasoned differently. So there's an infinite amount of combinations of food, and it would just be a foolhardy endeavor to try to tell people exactly what to eat. I'm not the best person to ask about this because I do eat a lot of meat like Matt does.
Yo, absolutely. That's the majority of my diet.
And here's the thing that you guys need to realize is our protein needs are based a lot on our body weight. And if you're overweight, you might be like, is it natural to eat this much protein? But you're already in an unnatural state by being overweight.
Right.
So as you lose weight, your protein needs will come down. Until then, you're best suited to hit them. So something I've suggested to some other people previously is take a protein shake that you like, preferably something with low fat and low carbs. So it's primarily just protein. Take your daily protein requirements. Let's say, you could hit your protein requirements by having 6 protein shakes a day. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you should do that.
Right.
Start with 6 and then go meal by meal and say, okay, if I'm going to replace this one shake with a meal, okay, maybe this one meal I'll have meat. So now we're down to, 5 shakes and 1 meal with meat. And then just go by meal and try to like replace that shake with something that's a real food. As far as non-meat protein sources, non-powder protein sources, it's tough to find them without the other macros.
Exactly.
So they're definitely out there, but they're going to have some other macronutrient in them. One of my personal favorites is pal pasta.
I wish I had said that, yeah.
That's a lentil pasta. Really good, super high in fiber. It's plant-based. But, one serving is going to get you maybe like 15 protein, but it's also going to get you like 60 carbs.
Right. So it's just not an efficient way.
Yeah.
As efficient, I should say.
You might blow through your other macros really fast.
Right.
Peanut butter is a good one.
Same thing with the fats then, I guess.
Same thing with the fat, a lot of fat. Also, a moderate amount of carbs in peanut butter too. Peanut butter is not... It's a pretty well-rounded food. I drink a lot of Fairlife milk.
I wish I had thought of that too.
I usually do the chocolate milk. but again, it does have a good amount of carbs and fats in it. You can do the Fairlife fat-free milk. What's interesting about the fat-free milk is the protein is the same. Obviously, it has no fats, but it does have less carbs in it too.
It does.
Than the regular milk and the chocolate. It doesn't taste that great to just drink because it's skim milk. It's really watery. But you could mix like half and half chocolate and the fat-free just to keep the calories and the fats down. Yeah, I think like beans and lentils and that kind of thing is going to be your best bet. There are quite a few protein products on the market now. The Kodiak cakes, which I just did a review of, again, a little bit on the higher side for carbs.
Delicious, though.
It's very delicious. Be aware of the fact that a lot of these high protein foods are literally just those foods with protein powder put into them.
Right, it's high everything.
Yeah. I would say, low fat or no fat yogurt.
Yeah, actually, Greek yogurt's a good one to go with, for sure.
I don't want to get into like a vegan or non-vegan debate, but for example, if you lived in New Hampshire pre-agriculture, pre-refrigeration, like hunter-gatherer, I mean, you would probably eat mostly meat.
Definitely.
Through the winter months. There'd be no vegetation. So, Matt brought up the concerns about cancer. What you have to realize is if you go to California and you breathe the air there, you're breathing dirty air. You have a higher rate of certain disease because of the air pollution in California. No one is going to say, well, you shouldn't breathe air, it's bad for you.
Right.
It's not the air, it's the pollution in the air. And the same thing can be said for some meats. Meat inherently is not bad for you. There is absolutely some concerns about factory farmed meat, how it's produced, the drugs they use on the animals, the foods that they feed the animals, which are unnatural.
Right.
There is a little bit there. But you can manipulate statistics any number of ways. And a lot of times people will see a headline that's like, oh, eating bacon increases your chance of getting colon cancer by, 15%. And it's like, okay, that could be statistically true. But what was the percentage risk prior to?
Right.
So if it went from 0.025% to 0.085%, you could say, yeah, it was a 15% increase. That doesn't mean you're at a great danger of experiencing colon cancer from eating bacon. So
exactly,
the statistics tend to get manipulated a lot.
Well, it's like the documentary. What was it? Was it What the Health? That talked about.
Yep.
I think the exact quote was that eating eggs daily was the same health risk as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Which is just absurd.
Exactly, and that's another example of kind of like twisting statistics to fit a need.
I mean, if you look at how long humans have been eating eggs, it's certainly long enough to have adapted and evolved to handle doing that. So
exactly.
Yeah, and what's unfortunate is, if people choose to not eat meat for ethical reasons, that's absolutely their choice. Nothing wrong with doing that. But what happens a lot of times is people have this emotional decision that they're making, and then they're looking for scientific validation after the fact. And when they don't find it, they tend to manipulate it because they don't want to give up on their belief.
Right.
Which is really too bad. Again, another tangent. There is some people out there trying to basically grow meat in a lab. So grow animal tissue without there being a living being. And honestly, that really excites me because I do think factory farming is kind of sucky. That's an understatement. But I do think, getting protein in the diet's important. And right. As Matt mentioned, animal sources of protein, they have a more complete amino acid profile, tend to have more creatine in them, which is also important for a number of reasons. So, and honestly, I just don't see people globally giving up chicken and beef anytime soon.
Right. And I feel like if we all gave that up too, I don't think that the health changes would be that drastic. I don't think that the meat is why you're unhealthy or why you're overweight.
Right.
It's what it's covered in, or
right.
what you're eating with it.
Yeah, and how much of it you're eating.
Right.
Meat is definitely more calorie dense, than vegetables are, regardless of the vegetable and regardless of the meat. That's a statement you can just generally make.
Right.
And I think when you see a lot of people, they went vegetarian, they went vegan, they lost weight. It's not necessarily the absence of meat that's causing the weight loss.
The caloric deficit.
It's just the calorie decrease that you just tend to have. I mean, I've done blogs about this. You basically have to eat an entire whole plate full of broccoli
to get absurd amount,
more than you could physically do,
right.
To get the same calories as a couple Pop-Tarts, which you can eat in 2 seconds.
Exactly.
So vegetables are very calorie sparse, and they carry a lot of vitamins and minerals without a lot of calories, which makes them a great option. But yeah,
it's a good stretch.
It's a good stretch.
All right, our next question comes from Laura. And she wants to know what the importance of foam rolling on a regular basis is. And I guess I'll start with this one. I've kind of changed my tune on foam rolling. I hate admitting when I'm wrong, but I am often wrong. I used to foam roll a lot, almost every day, and for exorbitant amounts of time. And now I will only grab a roller or a lacrosse ball if I am in pain and need to make an immediate change fast. We don't really know the science behind why foam rolling works. And a lot of it could just be a placebo effect or just a manipulation of the skin. And the same thing with massage. They're starting to realize that it might be more about the manipulation of the skin and human contact that's causing a change than anything, which is fine. I mean, if it's a placebo effect that's getting me pain-free, I'll take it. So that being said, I'm not a fan of foam rolling on a regular basis, but I do think it'll make short-term changes to allow you to get into better positions.
Well, I'm going to second Matt on that. Not a big fan of foam rolling. Haven't been for a long time. Foam rolling and mobility and recovery, you see the same thing that's happened in every other aspect of fitness, which is there's a little something there, a little bit of science, a little bit of anecdotal evidence, and then the industry just jumps on it because it's profitable.
Very.
So if you go on Amazon and you just type in mobility tools, there are just pages and pages and pages of gadgets and toys and all kinds of things that really, might have some application here and there. But I'm like Matt, if something hurts or something feels tight, I will hop on a roller or grab a ball real quick. But I don't have a training routine where I go through this thing or a post-training routine. I actually feel the same way about stretching. It feels good. It might temporarily alleviate pain. Not a whole lot of legitimate evidence to suggest that it's creating long-lasting change.
Yeah, I would say we're starting to realize that it isn't a long-lasting change. And then there's certain things that you have to manipulate to make it lasting. So I'm starting to realize with my stretching or mobility work, whatever you want to call it, it's more of a neurological effect that I'm looking for. And that's what causes long-term adaptations because... and that's why I'll use some isometric work, or you're doing a hamstring stretch and then you add a little bit of contract relax. That's going to make a lasting impression on your body. And it's not the stretch. It's that neurological firing and that adaptation that's happening that's making the change. It's not just passively stretching, which we're starting to realize.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to be said about placebo effect. If you're in discomfort because something feels tight, and you foam roll and then you don't feel in discomfort anymore, that's great.
Right.
Definitely do that.
And the same thing for stretching too. People like to argue over whether it's a long-term effect or a short-term effect. But that being said, if someone can't hit the bottom of a squat and then I have them stretch and then they can hit the bottom of a squat, or it might not be long-term that it's going to last, but the squatting afterwards in a good position will last if you continue to do it. So technically there, you can make long-term changes.
Yeah, we actually, at Arkitect, I don't program any stretching because it's so individualistic. It's almost too much.
Yeah.
And it can change so rapidly. What you might need to stretch this week might be totally different than next week. So
or even by day, yeah, it's crazy.
you will pull your hair out trying to program that ahead of time. So I just don't do it. There are some clients that ask for it, but we really just try to educate them on why they should or shouldn't do it. I mean, we actually recently had a client come in and sign up, and he was saying that he used to have really bad back pain, and then he started the stretching routine, and that's what fixed it. I'm not going to tell that guy that stretching isn't long-term effective, because for him, it was. And, there's a million different reasons why that might work for him and not for somebody else. So if you have a stretching routine that you like to do, absolutely don't stop doing it just because the science says, oh, this, might not be as beneficial as we thought. Definitely people I see spending a whole lot of time mobilizing and stretching, and it's like, it's not doing anything for you. You're just wasting your time.
I've been on both ends. I think for a 4 or 5 year period, I spent, and this is not an exaggeration, at least an hour every single day doing mobility work.
So much time.
And I want that time back.
Yeah.
I'm very upset. I thought it was working, and it did provide some changes, but I've stopped doing that for a year now, and nothing's changed. My mobility hasn't gotten worse at all. So, like I said, I really do want that time back.
Yeah, I mean, I never really got into it that much. I'm a pretty flexible person, especially for how big I am. A lot of people think like, oh, you're just like, gifted and natural at stretching and flexible. But I think for me, it's literally the fact that I started lifting weights at 12.
Right. That's the difference that I see. Like, so I've had some past coaches in weightlifting who, like, they're very mobile and they didn't have to stretch. But then you dig a little deeper and, like, they started in gymnastics, or they did, like, some sort of martial arts as a kid, or they've been weightlifting forever. And your body remembers that and holds on to it.
For more than anything else, mobility is literally just like body control. It's the stability and strength to maintain certain positions and achieve those positions in the first place. And that's what I think is funny about like yoga. So I had a client, a lot of people have done yoga at one point or another, but she hadn't done it in a while, and she was like, oh my God, I was so good at it. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're in here squatting hundreds of pounds, lifting weights every day, and then you're going to like low intensity strength training and you're good at it. Like, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Exactly.
Yoga, a lot of people think is stretching, but it's not. It's static strength development. It's a strength activity. It's low intensity because you're not lifting external weights. You're mostly just lifting yourself, and sometimes at advantageous positions. I mean, there's definitely yoga positions that require incredible amounts of strength. But yeah, and you look at yoga people who are so flexible, but they're also strong people.
Definitely.
Going back to the massage thing, a lot of people are always looking for like, I need a therapist that can get super deep and blah, blah. And what I found for myself for massage was I used to be that kind of guy, like, I want you to beat me up. And then I started to realize, like, I feel terrible after my massages.
Yeah.
And so I started taking an approach, asking the therapist to kind of go a little bit lighter and make it more relaxing. And I found I was getting much, much more out of that because I was almost like meditating.
Yeah.
Like that half asleep, half awake, but still like conscious. And just my entire body just like relaxing. And if you think about it, actually Clearing the Path to Victory, which you just read.
Yeah.
He talks, it's a sports psychology book, but almost all of it's like meditation type practices and like literally just trying to get the body to relax. Because if you are hopping on a foam roller and you're like working out these really tight, tender spots, you're just like tensing so much. And that's like a stress on your body. So, and
you're doing the opposite. The body's going to tighten up. It thinks that something bad's happening.
Right.
And then you achieve the opposite effect of what you've desired.
Which I wonder, and this is just a genuine question, I wonder if people feel less pain after foam rolling because it's so intense. They have that kind of like endorphin pain
I would
blockage.
argue for sure. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing of like, I don't know if your knee hurts and I punch you in the face. Your knee's going to feel a lot better, you know? And if you send out those hormones and those signals to, like, deal with pain specifically, it definitely changes things.
So, yeah, there it is. Stop foam rolling so much, guys.
I've seen a lot of, like everyone on Instagram now, like, the new thing's mobility, like Tony was talking about. But no one cares how flexible you are if you aren't going to use it. Like, if you're trying to mobilize into this crazy position or hit, like, a full split, who cares if you're just going to squat? Or if you're not even going to squat, if you're just getting into the car, like whatever your daily activities are, you need mobility to be able to do those.
Yeah.
You don't need more. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
All right. The next question comes from Elise. And she asks, why is overhead pressing so difficult? Which is something I can definitely sympathize with.
I think overhead pressing is difficult for a lot of people because it's just not something... Lifting overhead is something we don't have to do in our daily lives anymore. And there aren't a lot of sports that people participate in that require overhead strength anymore.
Definitely.
So if you look at athletes with really good overhead work, usually gymnastics athletes doing a lot of handstands, a lot of pull-ups, and even though overhead pressing and pull-ups are opposite actions, the lats do provide a lot of stability when you're pressing overhead.
For sure.
I just think it's that, like earlier we talked about the importance of sport-specific training. Sometimes you can get too specific. There's a gym in town here that's really big on powerlifting, and they literally do not have anyone overhead press. And, just as a general strengthening, shoulder health, being a well-rounded person, I do think, you should do some. Like, even if you're a powerlifter trying to bench, there might not be a ton of direct carryover, but, I'm more interested in building, like, people that aren't going to fall apart.
Right, you should still be able to put your hands over your head.
Yeah, so I just think that a lot of times people just don't do a lot of it.
For sure.
Especially military pressing with a bar standing.
And it's hard, and it's humbling, and it's not sexy. And those three things will probably make way less people do them.
And a lot of people are just lacking the mobility to be in a good overhead position.
Yeah, I would say 90% of it is like an overhead press is basically a full body movement.
Yeah.
And most people, it's not necessarily that they're weak in their shoulders or their upper body, is that they can't, one, get into the good position like Tony said, and then two, develop tension in the rest of their body to stay in that good position.
Yeah.
Like you see their back overextend, their hips shoot away, and it doesn't matter how strong you are. If you get into a crappy position, you're not going to lift a weight. So
yeah, it's really funny. I'm not a great overhead presser either.
Me neither.
I think my best ever is like 93 kilos, maybe.
You're still ahead of me.
I mean, it was like a big deal for me when I did it. But my buddy Jonas, hopefully Jonas is watching this. Great athlete. We were in the gym one day and we're talking about how hard overhead press is. He's like, I know. He's like, I never really got that far, with it. I said, oh, what's your best overhead press? He goes, it wasn't much. I think like 110 kilos, which is like
Jesus.
And he's a little guy, he competed as like a 77. So not little, but he's not a huge dude.
That's a respectable overhead press.
And I was like, what, dude? What?
Jesus.
So, what a lot of people don't know is the overhead press used to be part of Olympic style weightlifting. So it was the clean and it was the snatch, the clean and jerk, and the clean and press were the three events.
Right.
They got rid of the clean and press in 1972, partly because it was redundant. A lot of guys jerked and pressed very similar weights. For a long time, the world record overhead press was higher than the world record jerk.
That's insane.
But what was happening was people were overarching their back, leaning back to change the angle. So two things. One, you need less shoulder flexibility, but also recruit more pec. And it was just really dangerous. People were hurting their backs. So it kind of got nixed. And really, if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of sports that require you to have your hands over your head. Certainly not with load and for an extended period of time.
Say, if we add load, I can't think of any.
Gymnastics, so you get the handstand stuff. I can't really think of anything else. Can you? Strongman?
Strongman. I guess you could make an argument for swimming in the sense that, like, if you change the orientation of your body, you're still reaching overhead to pull.
Yeah, it's still more like a pull-up than it is a press.
Right, it's more of a pull-up, and then even then, it's not really loading it, but...
And if you think about, like, even day to day, what's the heaviest thing you're lifting over your head? You might put like a box of food or a book on a high shelf, but it's not directly overhead. It's not a lot of weight. You're not doing it for a prolonged period of time. If you're going to be doing something, really hard overhead, you're going to be getting a step ladder. Maybe like guys that do like drywall, sheetrock stuff.
Yeah, actually, now you say that, guys who work like on the ceilings and stuff.
But still, that's not a large group of people. So generally speaking, it's not a lot of activities. People usually make decent gains because of that, because it's underdeveloped.
For sure. It'll go up pretty fast, which is nice.
Also, with all that said, because it's an accessory exercise, don't beat yourself up over it. It kind of doesn't matter.
Right. If you're a powerlifter and you can't overhead press a lot, who cares?
Yeah. You do it to keep your shoulders healthy, get some extra tricep work in.
Right.
Keep your shoulder mobility adequate.
Exactly.
So,
but it's not the end goal.
Yeah.
The next one comes from Sheldon, and I'm assuming he's talking about training here, but he wants to know, is it true if you don't use it, you lose it?
I'm going to say it's not entirely true.
It's not, no, and that's where it gets tricky.
If you don't use it, you lose some of it.
Yes.
But once you have it, you kind of never actually totally lose it.
Right, well, that's the same thing you hear. Like, if guys were very successful strength athletes at an earlier age, and they come back, they're going to be pretty strong.
Yeah.
It takes a little while to come back, and you're going to be sore as hell, and you might not be as efficient with that strength, but it'll come back, and it's still there. It's coming back quickly, too.
Not to humble brag, but I can use myself as an example.
Right.
I just maxed my camber bar squat the other day. First time I've ever maxed that exercise.
You've never maxed a camber bar squat.
Yeah, so I did 200 kilos, 440 pounds, which, in the world of strength training is not a lot. But there's just not a lot of people, like, walking around that are like, hey, you know what, I'm going to max my camber bar squat and do 400 plus pounds today. And you've watched my training over the last few months. It's been very low intensity, low load, more like bodybuilding style. I actually put mass on my legs so fast that I've really been focusing more on upper body.
It must be nice.
But, I've squatted 400 plus pounds so many times in my life. I mean, the last time I did that much weight was probably October. So we're talking, 5 months ago.
Right.
And I can just walk into the gym and basically do that anytime I want because those neural pathways have been developed. Muscle does atrophy super quick.
It does.
24 hours you can start atrophying. But that's like bedridden, calorie restricted.
Right.
If you are staying active, even if you're not training specifically for certain activities, you will maintain a lot of those physical attributes.
For sure. I think people get a little too worried about taking a little bit of time off and losing everything, and it's just not going to happen.
A big eye-opener for me was that I had an athlete who broke her thumb, kind of like a freak thing. She was like snatching or clean and jerking, and I think what happened was like the bar bounced and just like came up and hit her in the thumb. I don't remember exactly what happened, but she had to be in a cast for like 6 to 8 weeks. We're all worried, oh my God, you're going to lose all these gains. And then she like came back and was like better than ever.
Right.
And I was like, oh, maybe you're like overtrained.
Right.
Maybe we're pushing too hard.
If anything, it can provide an opportunity for growth.
Yeah. So I've actually found time off to be really beneficial. You have to earn it.
Definitely.
You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to skip the gym today. I'm taking time off. It's good for me.
Or like overreach a little bit before that so that you're actually doing something with that time.
So yeah, if you don't use it, you lose a little bit. You've stopped going to the gym and then you just literally stop doing anything.
Right.
You're going to be in bad shape. You're going to be in for a bad time. But
yeah.
People maintain good training longer than they think.
For sure.
So
this next one comes from Becky. And Becky wants to know how she gets a boyfriend that doesn't suck.
Well, you're younger than me. You're more her age than she is. So maybe you should tackle this because I feel like so out of touch with how dating works in 2019.
Well, first of all, I feel like if you talk to my girlfriend, I probably don't qualify as a boyfriend that doesn't suck, so I probably can't speak to this. I don't know, Becky. Just stop looking where you're looking, though.
Yeah, I'm going to interject and disclaimer because we did have some concerned parties with tackling these types of topics.
True.
So I'm not a professional.
Nor am I.
But I do think that I'm pretty good at deconstructing things and kind of giving a unique perspective. So I will tackle this one. I will say that social media is ruining all of us.
Right.
It's a blessing and a curse. It's allowing you to watch this video right now. It's allowing us to grow our business, become better coaches, educate people more on training and nutrition. But the downside is it's kind of giving everyone a false sense of reality.
Right.
I think it's making people too picky.
I was going to say, you could be looking for something that's not there.
I think it's very easy to look at social media and think everyone else out there is beautiful and smart and fun and adventurous and these amazing people. And then you kind of look at maybe the person you're with and think,
right.
Oh, there's someone better out there for me. Like, this person's okay, but there's somebody better.
Exactly.
People usually just put the highlight reel of their life.
No one puts the low points, that's for sure.
Some people do. It's actually really annoying when people do.
That's a good point. It is like a double-edged sword because, like, we say, oh, you only put the highlights, you don't put the bad things. But then when you put the bad things, we're like, get out of here.
Yeah, people are like, you're just looking for attention.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's bad when people vague book.
Oh, it's gross.
I mean, like, someone just, like, checks into, like, the ER. And you're
right.
like, why are you at the ER? Did you bring somebody there? Are you there?
Right.
Like, are you dying?
Yeah.
Or they just, like, put, like, a frowny face as their status update.
Right.
So I think social media is making it harder to have genuine, long-lasting connections with people. I will also say that I think people are spread more thin than ever before.
For sure. I feel like we're all focused on, or feel like we have to be focused on so many different things. And everyone's always trying to like develop themselves in some way, which there's nothing bad about personal development, but you still have to make connections with other people.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people work multiple jobs, or they
Right.
have like a side hustle, or
Right.
they're just pulled in so many directions. There's so many distractions. It makes it difficult to like really give one person a lot of your time.
For sure.
Any other business owners out there will totally understand what I'm talking about. So how does Becky find a boyfriend that doesn't suck?
I feel like we need to give her an actionable step.
Right, I'm trying to think of what that is. I do think I'm at that point. I'm at that turning point in my life where I'm getting old enough where I'm like, kids these days. So I'm not feeling super confident about the advice I can give you. Don't worry about it.
It'll happen.
And
for sure.
it'll happen. I think when you're not trying to force it is when it kind of happens.
That's when I met Anna. I had sworn off dating, and look at it now. I would also say too is find people or put yourself in positions of or surround yourself with people who are passionate about what you're passionate about, and that just becomes easier because if they don't have much time, they're going to be spending that time doing things they're passionate about, which likewise you are as well.
Which I think Becky does a great job of. She's a super
For sure.
awesome person, and she does a lot of cool stuff. That's another thing. This is general advice for people. Just like say yes to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to sit at home and sit on the couch and binge watch Netflix or just like derp around on social media, but you're not going to like live your life. You're not going to experience life that way.
Right.
So just like say yes to a lot of things. If someone wants to go check something out or go somewhere or do something.
Exactly. Chili wants to know how he gets a girlfriend. We're starting at ground zero with Chili here.
I would say wear long sleeves at all times.
Long sleeves at all times.
So no one can see your tattoos.
Fair. You do look terrifying, Chili.
Yeah, you're very intimidating.
But that being said, grow back the mullet. I feel like that will help. Anything else for Chili?
Yes, probably stop being so weird on Instagram stories.
Yeah. Editing yourself as a picture of a baby being held by another man throws off the ladies.
Things,
for sure.
things you can expect to see on Chili's Instagram, which we will link below.
It's one of the greatest Instagrams you'll ever stumble upon.
Chili in a bathtub,
Yes.
like Skyping with somebody in a bathtub
Yes.
for some reason.
Yeah.
FaceTiming. Photoshopped onto animals or babies.
Yep.
Very odd. Lots and lots of pictures of him as an extremely awkward middle school aged person.
Yeah, I deleted all those. You don't want those around.
No, it's not a good look for anybody.
No.
I think that's the only advice I have.
I can't help you any more than that, Chili.
Yeah, best of luck to you, buddy. All right, everybody, that concludes the first episode of The Coach's Couch. I am Tony, and this is Matt.
Thanks for watching, guys.
And if you have any questions that popped into your brain while watching this, please comment below on this video, and we will make sure to answer them in the next video. And if there's anything or anyone you want to see on the couch with us, let me know. I'm not opposed to doing any
I'd love
beer
guests.
drinking or eating a food on camera or anything like that. to
I'll
make it
drink
more
beer and
interesting.
record videos if you guys want. If that's
Yeah.
what the people need.
So it's been fun, and we will see you next time. Peace.